People have created these star-shaped ornaments for years, but I've generally seen them made using paper tubes. I thought there must be another way to make them using basket weaving materials. Then, I read a comment from Juanita Karen on the Facebook weaving group that lit a light bulb. She wrote that she used number 4 round reed for the frame. That was the missing piece of my puzzle. Thank you, Juanita, for that tip.
Starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and gray. Look out on a summer's day.
These stars can be made in various sizes. These are small 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, and 6-inch stars. This larger star surrounds a floral frame. All are made using the same wrapping technique. This video contains 4 parts. In part 1, creating the frame, we'll cover making the 5-inch star frame. Part 2, weaving and wrapping the frame, we'll show how to wrap the frame, creating a finished star. In part 3, creating a backing for the star, we'll explore how to make one of those stars with a backing. And in part 4, weaving the floral frame large star, we'll weave this large star on a floral wire frame. First, let's gather the materials we'll need to weave this 5-inch star. Number 4 round reed, 11/64 flat oval reed or 3.5 millimeter chair cane, and either waxed linen or ribbon. For the larger star, we will use 1/2-inch flat fiber and a star floral wire frame. As we progress, we'll consider options to enhance your stars. You'll need some of the usual basket weaving tools: shears, a measuring tape, Elmer's glue awl and toothpicks, a pair of needle nose pliers, various clips. I use 2-inch and 4-inch clips, a pencil, a sponge, and of course, a pan of water. Before we move on, let's cover some tips I learned while making these. We'll discuss each of these as we go through the weaving process. Keep the frame as dry as possible while weaving the star. Getting them wet can misshape the star and dilute the glue. Soak your weavers prior to wrapping the star. If the weaver begins to dry out during the wrapping process, use a sponge to keep it damp. We won't spray water on the reed, making the smaller star. The larger star will be made with flat fiber, and we'll use no water on that one. Butt your weaver up against the previous row. This applies to the smaller 3 to 6-inch stars. On the large flat fiber star, we'll overlap your fiber on each round. Start and stop your weaving on the same star point. This helps keep your center pentagon even. It is helpful to mark the starting point with a clip or a tie so you can keep track of it. Give your glue plenty of time to set before weaving. When using Elmer's glue awl, that means several hours drying time. Tie the star hanger to its top point prior to weaving. However, avoid tying it to the point which was glued together. Soak the round reed thoroughly before crimping the star points with needle nose pliers. This helps prevent breaking the reed. Weave or wrap the star by turning the star frame to wrap the reed around it. Many weavers want to lay their project on the table and move the reed around the frame. Rotating the star and keeping the reed stationary helps prevent tangling your reed. One final note to avoid confusion. We'll be using the words weaving and wrapping interchangeably. With that said, let's start weaving. This is the frame we're going to make to support the star's weaving. It will create a 5-inch star. Determine the size of star you want to make and cut the number 4 round reed the appropriate length. Since we're making the 5-inch star, we'll cut ours 27 inches. Soak the reed thoroughly. This graphic identifies the 5 crimp points on your reed. Ours will be at 6 inches, 11 inches, 16 inches, and 21 inches. You have a choice. You can just crimp the first section and crimp the rest as you go. We'll do that in this video because I think it makes the measurements more accurate. Or you can use the guide to make all your crimps before you do the layout. For the 5-inch star, we will crimp the reed at the first point, 6 inches from the end of the reed. 4 points of the star are folds, and the 5th is glued. I've created a set of templates as part of the pattern to make things a little easier to understand. Instructions of how to request a copy of the pattern are at the end of this video. Select the appropriate size template for your star. The templates are designed so that you can cut them out and attach them to a corkboard. A 6-inch corkboard makes it easy to attach the reed to the template during the layout process. A 4-inch round will work best for the smallest frame. This is the template for a 5-inch star. These templates have been drawn full size, so when you print them, they should measure the size indicated from point to point. I've laminated this one to prevent water damage. You can do the same thing by placing it in a document protector. I attached the template to a 6-inch round corkboard to help keep it and the frame together. As you create the contours of the star's frame, clamp each star point in place before moving to the next. This makes the process a bit easier to manage. The 5-inch star frame uses about 27 inches of number 4 round reed. When we finish, this is what the star frame looks like on the pattern. I've already cut the 27-inch piece of reed and will measure 6 inches from the end to determine our first crimp point. Crimp it using your needle nose pliers. That crimp should allow it to bend without breaking. Now, we'll place that crimp at point 2 and extend the end to the top, which is point 1. Let's put a clamp on both points to hold the reed in place. Next, we'll crimp the reed at point 3 and extend our reed to point 4. Use a clamp to secure the frame to point 3. Our next crimp will be at point 4 and we'll bend the reed so it crosses to point 5. As it extends to point 5, it intersects with 2 legs of our frame already in place. We want to create an over-under weaving pattern to make this frame a bit stronger. So, as we stretch the reed to point 5, we'll weave it under the first leg we encounter and over the second. Then we'll clamp point 4 in place. After we crimp point 5, we'll take our reed back to point 1. Again, we'll weave it through the 2 legs we encounter, this time under the first, which is opposite of what we did a minute ago, and we'll go over the second leg, ending up at point 1. Then clamp point 5 in place as well as the 2 ends at point 1. This assembly is snug against our template. Now, align the 2 ends to the template, making sure they intersect at point 1. Take a pair of scissors and cut the 2 ends diagonally at the same time. This allows them to butt against each other. Next comes the glue to anchor these 2 ends together. With the point glued and clamped, we still need to add some glue to the intersections that form the pentagon in the center. You shouldn't need to clamp these points while the glue is drying. The pressure from the clamps on the spokes will be enough to hold the legs together. We'll let the glue dry overnight. Once our frame is dry, we can weave on it. I often make several at a time and let them dry overnight so I can weave them the next day. For perspective, I thought I'd show you what various frames look like together. To begin weaving, we'll first need to establish the place to start. Where we connected the 2 ends at point 1, the frame may not be strong enough to handle a hanger, so we won't start there. Instead, rotate the star, putting any other point at the top, and that will become our starting point. We will start and stop behind here throughout the process. With the top determined, attach the optional hanger to the point. Wax linen or ribbon works well. This will also be a reminder of where you are while weaving. It can later become a hanger if you want to use it as an ornament, or if you don't need it afterwards, you can just cut it off. Hint: it is important that you keep track of the location of the top of your star as you weave. This will ensure you equalize your center pentagon. I've soaked my 11/64 flat oval reed to prepare it to weave. You can also use 3.5 millimeter cane. You'll need about 13 to 16 feet of reed to weave the 5-inch star. If the reed is not long enough, I'll show you in a bit how to add more length. This is the same material I use to weave a 6-inch star. I use 3 millimeter flat oval reed or cane for the 3 and 4-inch stars. As we weave, we'll be going from our starting point to the next point clockwise all the way around the star until you arrive back at the top. We'll do that again and again, working inward until we have about 6 or 7 rows completed. Let's start by clamping the end of the reed, bad side down, along the front of the left leg of our starting point. Don't worry about the tail, it will be covered as we weave. To manage my weaver, I'm going to turn the frame to wrap the weaver around each point rather than wrapping the reed around the point. This helps to avoid twisting the reed and getting it tangled. This process also keeps the flat side of the reed against the frame. With the wrap made, move the clamp up to hold it in place and stretch the weaver to our next point clockwise around the star. Left-handers can reverse the process with no problem. We'll wrap our weaver around the next point again by rotating the star. Clamp it in place. You'll want to use clamps for the first few rows. As we reach the top, remove the clamp and make your next wrap as snug as possible to the first wrap. If you want to have an overlap, you can. Just make sure that you keep the overlap even all through the weaving. If you don't, your center pentagon will look uneven. Remember too, if you overlap, it will require you to use more reed, or else you'll end up with a huge gaping hole in the center of your star. What we're doing here will require about 7 rows to the center, or whatever you feel looks good. Keep weaving and packing it tight as you go until you get to the center or run out of reed. As we said at the onset, we're not using a spray bottle to keep our reed wet. Water can break down the glue and misshapen or weaken your frame. When the reed comes out of the water, we'll shake off the excess water really well. As we weave, we're carefully wiping our reed with a wet sponge to keep it supple. If you need to add reed, I told you it was easy. If you want to change colors, follow these same instructions, but you'll likely want to change colors at the top of the star. To add new reed, stop behind any point on the back of the star. Trim the excess to prevent it from passing beyond the back. Apply glue to the tail of the reed across the back and overlap the new reed over the old. Then clip the 2 pieces together to dry. The damp reed may take a little extra time to dry. Once it's dry, you can pick up the new reed and continue wrapping as you had been doing. When you reach the end of your rows, stop behind the top point and end the weaver. Place glue on the previous row, clip them together and let them dry and trim the excess. You now have a completed basic star. When you turn the star over, the frame you used to create the star is visible. It works perfectly fine this way, but if you want to cover the framework, Part 3 will show you how. These are 2 completed stars. This star we just finished and the other we created a backing for it. The backing can become a canvas to embellish and decorate your work. Both stars are woven exactly the same with just a couple of differences. We'll make the backing by cutting a star pattern to match the frame on a thin, waterproof material. This is a foam sheet I found in the children's crafts section of Michael's that works well. I chose a tan color because I wanted something neutral. We're going to trace the star onto the sheet and cut it out. I considered making a template for this process, but quickly realized no two stars are alike. So tracing seemed to be the best option to create a background that would be a perfect fit. We'll cut it out and incorporate the backing with the weaving. Just like before, choose a starting point on your frame. Then we'll lay the star on the foam sheet and trace the star's contours onto that sheet. The tracing should follow the outside of the star. I'm going to put a dot on the backing's top point so it will always be in the proper position against the frame. It will be hidden by the weaving. I'm using sewing scissors to cut this foam backing since basket shears don't seem to cut this material very well. We'll need to trim the ends of each point so they don't stick out through the ends of the star's weaving. You don't need to measure it, just trim off a 1/4 inch or so. And before we start weaving, one option could be to dress up the backing first. Let's say you want to add something like this sticky back glitter cardstock. Doing it now will make it easier than trying to apply the applique later. And it can create a good look. We'll keep our backing very basic for now. The weaving will be just like before, and our weaving will hold the backing against the frame. Before weaving the last row, I'm going to put a bow in place while the gap is still wide enough for me to insert it. Then we'll finish the last trip around the inside of the star. Once you get to the end and secure the tail, you've got a star with a back. This star has been woven using a wire floral form as the frame. It measures about 14 inches across from point to point and is woven just like the smaller stars. I bought this frame from Dollar Tree. It's sold painted dark green. So we spray painted it in a tan or nutmeg color. This helps the tips blend with the flat fiber. You don't have to paint it, but it's a thought. This star was woven with 1/2 inch flat fiber. Anyone familiar with projects I've done knows flat fiber is one of my favorite mediums to weave. You can use reed for this project, but it will take a lot to cover this frame. Flat fiber is paper and commonly used in seat weaving. It's also quite flexible and easy to handle. It covers large projects well since it comes in longer lengths and is relatively inexpensive compared to reed. The star I just showed you required 24 yards of flat fiber. Another I wove required 32 yards. How much you need depends on the amount of overlap on your rows. As a reference, a 1-pound coil of 1/2 inch flat fiber contains about 42 yards of material. Another thing to note is since flat fiber is paper, you won't use any water while weaving. I cut my fiber into 8-yard lengths to make it easier to weave. You'll notice it's a very curly material, so you'll want to relax it before you weave. You can do that by pulling it downward over something like a weaving tool handle, pulling it against the curl. Pull it hard and you'll see it straightens, making it easier to weave. Let's start at the top of the star. I connect the fiber to the frame using a regular clothespin and put a tie at the point. Then, just like before, we start wrapping from point to point. We'll likely have to use clips on the points for several laps around the frame. This fiber may be paper, but it's much tougher than regular reed and might take some muscle to wrap it around tight on your frame. And it's a slow process. When I get back to the starting point, we'll overlap the second row of fiber over the first. It doesn't snug up against itself as well as reed does, so the overlap helps eliminate any gaps. We'll keep weaving until we can't see any of the wire frame. You may find adding additional clips behind and along the frame will help control your weaving as you go and keep the overlap even. There's a couple of things that will help as you move forward. To help manage your overlap, we're going to add a spot of glue to each intersection of the overlap. Flat fiber takes glue very well. We'll also add a drop of glue along the back side of the point under the overlap occurring back there. A clip at each glue point will hold the fiber in place as it dries. It may help to use 2 clips on the back side as you get closer to the center. The other thing to note is how to add a new length of fiber. The process is pretty straightforward. We'll trim and secure the end of our current length on the back side of any point on the star. Next, we'll glue the new length of flat fiber on the end we just secured. When we finish the star, we'll do it just as we did the smaller ones. Once we return to the starting point, we'll bring the weaver around to the back of the star, trim the excess weaver's length, apply a streak of glue, and lay the weaver end across the back side of the star. A couple of clips will hold it in place until it finishes drying. Letting it set overnight is best. It is a quick, simple weave that only took a couple of hours to do. Once dry, you can decide how you want to deal with it. Flat fiber takes many finishes really well. This one has been sprayed with 2 coats of clear shellac, or you can use clear lacquer. Once the shellac is dry, you can spray paint it any color you wish. Leaving it natural may make it easier to decorate it based on the season, and there are a number of ways to do that. This is one of my favorite pictures of my sons and me when we were all in the Air Force at the same time, using the star as a picture frame. The only limit is your imagination. I am always open to suggestions or comments about these video projects, and I'll answer any questions you might have. Goodness knows I've likely missed a thing or two. If you'd like a copy of the pattern and graphics included in this video, send me an email at the address on the screen and I'll be glad to share them with you. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to share this pattern with you. And as always, I'd love to see pictures of your finished projects. We create these videos as an easy way to share our discoveries with others. Here's hoping you have a few discoveries of your own.